Well, hello. I'm recording this on Saturday evening, July 3rd, and there's a beautiful wind blowing, and I'm on my sun porch, as you can see. And I don't know when I'm going to get this out. I'm extra busy right now. I've been planning a wedding reception, so I'm sorry I haven't been right on target with weekly videos, but I'm doing the best I can. You might not hear from me for a couple weeks because of the wedding reception coming up, but I will be back for sure. Our topic today is affection. It comes from the root word affect, which means to influence or cause to change. And any religion worth having is one that needs to be able to change us, to change every part of our being. If you don't have that, you can. Do you have thoughts of affection? I'm sure you do. Probably the typical ones of warm, fuzzy feelings and tender thoughts towards somebody. When we think of affection, we often think of showing affection, being affectionate, having an emotional feeling towards someone, and I actually have a hugometer for you. And we're going to look at just some of the feelings that we might feel and sense on that hugometer. The first one is a creepy feeling, hug, on that hugometer, and that's because you sense that there's something wrong, that this is not good, and you need to pay attention when you feel that kind of a hug, that creepy hug from someone. A little up from that is the icy feeling hug. You just know that person did not want that hug. A little up from there is the fake feeling hug, and that's sort of like a politician doing a photo op. It's something they have to do. It's the sort of for show. It's the fake hug. And we're getting a little warmer, but still not quite warm, and that's the stiff hug. These people tend to, they're okay, they're open to hugging, they're fine with it, but for some reason, maybe something in their background, which we can't talk about here, but maybe there's something that causes them to stiffen even though they welcome the hug. And it feels like you're hugging a board. So getting a little warmer is just the average, plain old hug, the hug that's just kind of normal. Getting a little bit warmer is the I'm here for you hug. That's sort of like, best friends and maybe the Barnabases in your life, and maybe somebody who's counseling you for something, or something you've been through, and they're listening to you, and they know you're hurting, and they just embrace you with that hug. It's the I'm here for you hug. Then there's one of my favorites. It is the teddy bear hug, and that's that one where you just feel like you're sinking into one another in a pure, wholesome way, but it's authentic, it's real, it's warm, and it's just the bear hug. Then there is the parting hug. If you've ever had someone leave, like someone go off to the military or go to another land, and you don't know when you're going to see them again, there's that parting hug. And the last one is a back together again hug. Now, I remember when Nathan, our baby, was in Japan for 4 years, and we didn't see each other except on Skype for 4 years. So I remember when he came back, then you get that hug, and I just stood there and wanted to just look at him, But that is the hugometer, and I'm sure with each one of those, perhaps you had a memory or you thought of a certain person when each of those was said. Today, we're going to talk about 3 different scenarios of affection, and also we're going to talk about attention in the Bible, but we're going to concentrate on religious or spiritual affections. We'll be right back. Welcome to Know and Grow. You can't live what you don't know. I'm Bonnie Wiley, wife, mother, follower of Jesus, called to ministry, doing what I love most. Today we're on the third in our A-Team series. We've talked about ambition already and attention, and today we're talking about affection. I have my A-Team, and it has 9 members. Here's a picture of it so you can see what we've been talking about and what we're yet going to talk about. But today, we're going to unpack first 3 ways we can look at affection, the 3 scenarios. One is we're moved, but we don't do anything. We might have fleeting feelings. We might hear a story about starving people somewhere, and we feel, but we don't end up doing anything, and that's not true affection. Then there's we do something, but we really aren't moved to do it. That's when, say, you don't feel like doing something, but you do it anyway, and that can be the right thing to do sometimes. There are times when there is the right thing to do, we don't feel like doing it, but we do it anyway. Sort of like my exercise routine. Believe me, I don't always have warm, fuzzy, I can't wait to do my exercises feelings, but I do it anyway because I'm trying to take care of the temple that God gave me. So sometimes even when our hearts aren't in something and we do it, it pleases God. But the best scenario of affection, the truest, is when God has both our heart and our action. We feel, we're moved, we have a desire or longing so much that it causes us to do something about it. It impacts us to the point of action. Let's look for a moment at affection in the Bible. According to Bible Study Tools website, which seemed like a really good website if you're looking for a site where you can study, affection in the Bible is shown in 3 ways, and here I'll read them to you. One is in the literal sense. That's when our feelings are acted upon or affected in some way, literally. And their example was Colossians 3:2, where it says, set your affections on things above. Now you notice the word set. That's intentional. And that is not always that warm, fuzzy feeling. That's an intentional, willful decision. So affection isn't always just a fleeting emotion. Number 2 is when affection is used in a good sense, and their example in the Word was Colossians 29:3. Because I have set my affection on the house of God. That was David, and you know how much he loved the house of God, and he talked about when he couldn't be at it, how badly he felt and how he longed to be in the house of God. So in that good sense, it's like that warm, tender attachment, goodwill. And number 3 in the Bible is when affection is used in an evil sense, when passions are used the wrong way. And their examples were Galatians 5:24, the flesh with the affections and lusts. And then Romans 1:26, God gave them unto vile affections. Now there's a lot more verses in the Bible with the word affection in it, but I just wanted to give you those 3 different types that we can find in the scripture. But what we want to concentrate on today is Jonathan Edwards' treatise called The Religious Affections. Now, if you think I'm tackling Jonathan Edwards, you might think I'm beside myself, and good luck to her. Because he is a very famous person from our past. But I want to go over his definition of affections first, and you'll see it in the picture here. His definition of affections is the affections are no other than the more vigorous and sensible exercises of the inclination and will of the soul. He goes beyond fondness and hugs and all those things that are our typical ideas of affection. His treatise on religious affections is focused on spiritual affections, especially those demonstrated in a period of awakening. Since so many of us are praying for and excited about and anticipating a revival, I thought that would be a good direction to go. I felt led to go in that direction to talk about affections. Let me give you a little bit of a background on Jonathan Edwards. He lived from 1703 to 1758. He was a revivalist preacher, a theologian, a philosopher, and he was from the Puritan tradition. His grandson, now get this, listen to this. You'll remember this story from your history books probably. His grandson was Aaron Burr Jr. Does that ring any bells? He was the third vice president of the United States, and he was the one involved in that famous duel with Alexander Hamilton, and Alexander Hamilton was the one who lost that duel. He was shot. Jonathan Edwards' son-in-law, Aaron Burr Sr., he stood for the religious fervor of the time. He was in favor of it, and he was the second president of Princeton University. Jonathan Edwards actually was the third president of Princeton University. And the Princeton University of today isn't like it was then. If you think of these great men of the word and think, oh my goodness, is it still like that? Well, no, it's not like that anymore. Jonathan Edwards is an icon of the Great Awakening, the first one, the first Great Awakening. He was a forerunner of the Protestant missionary efforts back in the 1800s. He was the only boy of his family, and he had, get this, 10 sisters, and then he married and had a family, and he had 11 children. He had a rigorous home education and started at Yale at age 13. He was the preacher. Now, if you haven't remembered him at all so far, this might help you remember the name. He was the one who wrote and preached Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. He refuted atheism. He lived during the period of the Enlightenment, when people both on the England side of the Atlantic and the American side of the Atlantic were leaving the biblical traditions and believing that the world was purely natural. They were leaving the supernatural. That was part of the Enlightenment. He died after a smallpox inoculation, shortly after he became president of Princeton, and he owned slaves, as did many Christians of that time. And here's a tidbit. Sometimes when you hear me say tidbit, and I've flashed that big red sign, it's something I'm going to tell you that might be a little bit of an aside from our topic. But since you saw that he owned slaves, I just wanted to go over this. At earlier times in history, all nations, all races, and all religions owned slaves. Blacks owned black slaves. Blacks sold blacks to slave traders. Slavery was a normal part of life, and it was only later in history that people thought slavery wasn't a right thing to do. People who lived in earlier times would think we were odd for how we think of it today. I'm not saying they were right. I'm just trying to let you know some of the history of how slavery was in other times. It's just a simple fact that people of different times, for various reasons, think completely different than people from another time. And if you think that you're enlightened, we need to think again, because right now we have human trafficking, even done by higher up people that we would probably be shocked if we knew they were involved. We have abortion, which is a form of child sacrifice. So, we don't have to look far. We can just look even into our own hearts to know that we are far from perfect. And every time period has its issues. That's why we need the light of the world. That's why we need Christ. Okay, so let's look a little bit further into the religious affections. It's one of Jonathan Edwards' most important works. The First Great Awakening ran from 1740 to 1742, and he addressed both ends of what we see in a revival. He addressed those who spoke out against it on one end, and those who got off in the flesh on the other end. His concern was for people to experience the fervor of revival, but that those religious affections, emotions, experiences, manifestations would mean a truly changed Christian. Many of us are seeking for a move of God today. So let's just talk a little bit about spiritual affection that occurs during a revival. Since the content in this video is longer than usual, I'm going to stop right here and pick this topic back up in our next video. So tune in next time for the completion of Part 3, Affection, in our A-Team series. See you next time.